So how do you see Bitcoin through the lens of Austrian economics?
Austrian economics really encourages people to stop thinking in tribal terms of like nation states and groups and these abstract things that come from Marx and socialist ideologies, and really gets back to the basics. So there's a huge link where with Bitcoin you can prevent the business cycle from happening. These big long time depressions, you can prevent them. Well, Bitcoin's principles go back to the cypherpunks, so the cypherpunk movement, and they really emphasize individual sovereignty and the right to privacy. So it's a very human rights focused movement. And if you look at the writings of especially Ludwig von Mises, he was more utilitarian. Like he was a Kantian. He believed more that you had to be pragmatic in thinking about the world and the economy. And so I think Bitcoin is actually going to push Austrian economics more in the direction of natural law, which was Rothbard, and there's other Austrian economists who basically said that no, you cannot split economics from rights, like things like theft and fraud. Like you need to incorporate those in your theories, and so I think that's the right way. I think Bitcoin is aligned with that, and I think Austrian economics is also going to go that way.
And Austrian economic places a significant emphasis on the concept of sound money. Can you explain how Bitcoin embodies this principle and the implications it has for the global financial systems?
Yeah, so Austrian economists, this school goes back to the 1800s, and as you probably know, like Karl Marx was writing in the 1850s, and one of the 10 planks of the thing that he believed in was a central bank. Like you found a central bank, you centralized the banking system, and in that way you can have so much more control over people, and then you can also steal from the future. You make the money very cheap, and then you have these boom periods that are artificial and it feels weird, and then you have a big crisis, and it happens over and over. So sound money is so important because it prevents governments from spending however much they want. There's a limit to their spending, and so that means there's a limit to warfare and things like that, and that's why they place so much emphasis on that. And so, Friedrich Hayek, this is much later, of course, but he wrote about the denationalization of money. Like we need to separate money and state, and Bitcoin is, I think, just that dream come true. Like it's reality now.
How do you view the evolution of central banks in the age of Bitcoin and decentralized finance?
Yeah, the way central banks will evolve in the face of Bitcoin being a real thing now and growing is, I think it'll be similar. Their power is going to evolve similar to the power of the Catholic Church 500 years ago, where for a long time it was almost the most powerful institution in the world. It was almost everything there was, multinational institution. And then gradually, because of the printing press and the Reformation movement, people started experiencing religion more personally and more in their own ways and in more decentralized ways. And so the Catholic Church still exists today, but it has much less power. And so I think similarly, governments for a long time, they will still keep trying to make their own coins because it's so tempting to print your own money, right? It's very tempting. Politicians love getting something for nothing, right? So they want to keep doing that. But I think that the power for them of them doing that is going to decrease, and that means that the government budgets are going to shrink. Private people, like families and individuals and communities, they will have much more financial power in the future to create society in the way that they see.
Do you see the parallel between these theories and volatility and cycles with the cryptocurrency market?
Yeah, so I think these are two very different things. So the business cycle and the boom and the bust in Bitcoin, you could say, well, it's the same. It's actually not the same, because the difference is in the boom and bust cycle, the traditional one that we've seen in the 20th century with the Great Depression and all those different crises, is that there was fraud involved. Like basically you make the money artificially cheap, and then people have the illusion that they have more savings than they really have. And so they buy a house and a swimming pool, and they spend money on vacations. And then when the bust comes, they realize, oh no, this was wrong. I was wrong. And then they basically lost a lot of money. Whereas the Bitcoin cycle is purely speculative. Like you also had it, for example, with, when people started refining oil. Like they were also quick cycles. So these are manias that we're seeing in Bitcoin, but they are not so pervasive as the business cycle. So it affects people, but it's just part of the learning process. We're just discovering Bitcoin, what it can do, and it's part of the natural process. Like imagine if gold was invented 10 years ago, we would also have these cycles. It looks similar, but it's extremely different.
And some critics argue that Bitcoin has no intrinsic value. From an Austrian perspective, how would you address this criticism?
Yeah, and it's true that back in 2010, 11, 12, 15, and a bit later, there were Austrian economists who were looking at Bitcoin and saying like, oh, but this does not come from a commodity first. Like they thought that money always came from something that was useful first, and then it became a money, like salt, for example. That's we still talk salary. It comes from salt. People use it as money. But Bitcoin actually is useful in the beginning as a collectible, just because it's interesting. It was funny. It was interesting. So it started circulating and getting a price because of that. People just thought it was interesting, and so in a way, people have been adjusting some of the Austrian theory around the origins of money, and it actually does not violate any economic rule. But I think the old, the fiat bishops and the fiat popes, the people in charge, they know they have to have an answer. They need to come up with something that's a little bit better than it was. And now it's just very, very difficult because the inflation is going up. That's one of the things that you hear them never talk about when they say, oh, we're doing CBDC and, we don't need these dodgy decentralized currencies. We can do it better. They never talk about money supply and inflation, because they know that's where they lose, and that's what we need the most, is to have money that retains value.
Making that sound money come back.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much.
You're
that
welcome.
was awesome.